The hatch slams shut. Inside the Panther, Oberfeldwebel Klaus Brenner feels the familiar weight of 80 millimeters of sloped steel surrounding him. September 19, 1944, Haraucourt, France. Through his periscope, the morning fog sits thick as cement. He trusts this armor. His crew has survived 3 months since Normandy. The 113th Panzer Brigade rolled off the factory line barely 2 weeks ago, but Brenner's confidence isn't in the brigade, it's in the machine. The Panther's frontal glasses can deflect anything the Americans throw at it. 75mm Shermans? Jokes on tracks. His 75mm KWK-42 L-70 can punch through their armor at 2,000 meters. The engine rumbles. 45 tons of German engineering, built on the lessons learned from encountering the Soviet T-34. Brenner has read the doctrine manuals, seen the test results at Kummersdorf. This tank was designed to restore armored supremacy. Movement ahead, his gunner whispers. The fog swirls. Brenner strains to see. No reconnaissance patrol reported American positions here. The 113th lacks integral scouting units, a cost-cutting measure in the rush to get Panthers to the front. Something flickers through the mist. Not a Sherman. Multiple targets. Infantry? Artillery positions? He can't tell. The fog neutralizes his range advantage, his superior optics, his carefully calculated firing tables. Crack. The sound comes from the right flank, not the front. A 76mm round from an M18 Hellcat slams into the Panther's side armor, 50mm thick, penetrable. Orange light floods the interior. Brenner's loader screams. The ammunition rack detonates, and in the fraction of a second before everything ends, Klaus Brenner understands. The armor didn't fail. The system did. And the Americans have built something his doctrine never prepared him to face.
Rewind 6 months, spring 1944. The German High Command faces a crisis invisible to tank crews like Brenner, but catastrophic to strategic planners. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Commander-in-Chief West, stares at intelligence reports detailing Allied preparations across the English Channel. He commands forces depleted by transfers to the Eastern Front, 45,827 troops and 363 armored fighting vehicles stripped away during the Soviet Dnieper-Carpathian offensive. What remains in France? Understrength divisions, Ostlegionen conscripts from occupied Soviet territories, aging equipment, and severe fuel shortages. German tank production peaked to 380 Panthers in July 1944, but mechanical failures claim 20 to 30% before they ever see combat. General Paul Hauser's post-battle assessment reveals the brutal mathematics. During movement to the battle zone, up to 30% of tanks break down, overheated transmissions, fractured final drives, inexperienced crews making fatal errors in vehicles they've operated for days, not months. The doctrine remains sound, in theory. Panzer divisions still practice Auftragstaktik, mission-type orders granting junior commanders initiative. Combined arms coordination, tanks, mechanized infantry, artillery, air support moving as synchronized instruments of mobile warfare. This system shattered France in 1940, drove deep into Russia in 1941. But in 1944, the variables have changed. Allied air supremacy transforms German daylight movement into suicide. Convoy commanders receive explicit orders, move only at night, without lights, leave burning vehicles on rows to attract aircraft away from operational units. The Luftwaffe, once Germany's tactical trump card, has been bled white. At Normandy, Allied fighters fly 12,000 sorties on D-Day alone. German pilots manage a few dozen. Most critically, the Allies have learned. They've studied German doctrine, captured training manuals, interrogated prisoners. And they've created a counter-system built not on superior armor, but on synchronized mass, a weapon that will turn German steel into burning monuments to doctrinal obsolescence.
Fort Hood, Texas, September 1941. Lieutenant General Leslie McNair watches experimental formations maneuver through the scrub brush. The Louisiana War Games just concluded with a troubling revelation. American tanks, designed for exploitation and breakthrough, struggle against coordinated anti-tank defenses. McNair's solution contradicts conventional wisdom. Create a separate branch. Tank destroyers, vehicles built for speed and firepower, sacrificing armor for mobility. The doctrine: tanks fight infantry in breakthrough, tank destroyers hunt enemy armor. 80 battalions planned, each with 36 self-propelled guns or towed weapons. At GMC's Fisher Body Plant in Grand Blanc, Michigan, engineers wrestle with specifications. The M10 Wolverine emerges, a 76.2mm M7 gun mounted on a modified Sherman chassis. Open-topped turret, crew exposure to artillery fragments,
but faster target acquisition and escape. Maximum armor, just 37 millimeters at the gun shield. An engineer named J. Walter Christie's suspension system allows speeds exceeding the Sherman's. Reconnaissance elements trained to identify German armor positions, calculate firing solutions, execute flanking maneuvers. Then comes the M18 Hellcat. Fastest tracked vehicle in the U.S. arsenal, 76 millimeter gun, 55 miles per hour on roads. The crews practice shoot and scoot tactics, fire, displace, fire again, never stay static, never engage frontally if flanking is possible. British workshops modify Shermans with the 17-pounder anti-tank gun, the Firefly. Penetration power rivaling German 88mm cannons, but the long barrel makes concealment difficult. Tank commanders' landers learn Fireflies in formations, revealing them only when Panthers or Tigers appear. In artillery schools, forward observers train with new radio equipment, VHF sets light enough for tanks, proximity-fused shells that detonate above ground, showering fragments into open crew compartments. The pieces exist separately. The question becomes, can commanders synthesize them into something greater than the sum? September 1944 will provide the answer, written in burning German armor across the Lorraine countryside.
November 1942, Tunisia. The 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion deploys along Highway 15 near Kedab Ridge, defending the 1st Infantry Division. 31 M3 half-tracks mounting 75mm guns, crews fresh from stateside training. Dawn, February 14, 1943. German panzers materialize through dust clouds. This is the moment tank destroyer doctrine imagined. Concentrated armor assault, mobile defense, flanking fire. First Lieutenant James Morrison crouches behind his half-track stun shield. The panzers advance to within 100 meters. His crews fire, displace to pre-surveyed positions, fire again. Artillery coordinates through radio nets, dropping shells ahead of the German column. 38 German tanks burn by midday. But the 601st loses 21 M3s. The 899th Tank Destroyer Battalion, rushing to reinforce, loses 7 new M10s to German return fire. General George Patton's assessment: unsuccessful. The problem isn't the concept, it's the execution. Half-tracks offer minimal protection. Crews panic under artillery fire. Coordination between infantry, armor, and destroyers remains clumsy. Radio discipline breaks. Artillery fires on friendly positions. At Aracourt, 20 months later, the system has evolved. Command A of the 4th Armored Division, veterans of Normandy's hedgerows and the breakout at St. Lo, has refined combined arms into an art form. Colonel Bruce Clark positions his forces in depth, outposts of armored infantry and engineers forward, tanks and tank destroyers on reverse slopes, artillery pre-registered on approach routes. When Lieutenant Edwin Leeper's 4 M18 Hellcats spot German armor emerging from woods on Hill 246, he doesn't charge. He waits, calls for artillery, coordinates with Sherman platoons on his flanks. The German column, 22 panzers, drives blindly into the kill zone. Leeper's Hellcats fire from defilade. Sherman's maneuver to expose German side armor. Artillery drops smoke and high explosive rounds. 14 panzers destroyed in 18 minutes. The doctrine has become lethal.
General Hasso von Manteuffel assumes command of the 5th Panzer Army on September 1, 1944. His intelligence officers brief him on Allied capabilities across the Moselle River. The assessment appears manageable: understrength American units, extended supply lines, vulnerable bridgeheads. Manteuffel orders a counteroffensive. Target: recapture Luneville, eliminate 12th Corps' Moselle crossing at Dulaward. Forces available: the 11th Panzer Division, experienced but depleted, and 2 new formations, the 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, fielding 262 tanks and assault guns total. Each brigade operates 45 Panzer IVs and 45 Panthers fresh from factories. The problem reveals itself immediately. Brigade crews have trained together for 2 weeks. Many cannot read tactical maps. Fuel shortages limit pre-battle rehearsals. No integral reconnaissance units scout enemy positions. What Manteuffel doesn't know, Allied intelligence has cracked German communications. Radio intercepts reveal his attack timing, axis of advance, unit compositions. Colonel Clark receives this intelligence 18 hours before the assault. He repositions Combat Command A into a deliberate defense, extended outpost line creating a salient, with tank destroyers and artillery positioned to enfilade any penetration.
More critically, he coordinates with 19th Tactical Air Command, forward ag controllers in bed with tank companies, equipped with VHF radios for direct communication with P-47 Thunderbolt squadrons overhead. The strategic picture becomes clear to Allied commanders. This isn't just a local counterattack. German doctrine demands concentration of force, rapid penetration, exploitation deep into enemy rear areas. But fuel shortages, mechanical breakdowns, and crew inexperience have transformed German armor from a scalpel into a sledgehammer, powerful but predictable. And the Allies have built a system specifically designed to break sledgehammers. Artillery positions multiply, fighter-bomber bases proliferate across France, tank-destroyer battalions deploy in mutually supporting networks. By mid-September, every German panzer movement is observed, reported, and targeted before tracks hit mud. The quantitative advantage has shifted. Now comes the test of whether quantity, properly coordinated, can overwhelm quality, isolated and predictable.
September 19th, 1944, 0800 hours. Fog blankets Aracourt like wet wool. Sergeant Bill Hoffman hunches in his Sherman's turret, Company C, 37th Tank Battalion. He can't see 15 feet. Radio crackles. Movement east, multiple targets. The Panthers materialize like ghosts. Hoffman counts 8 hulking shapes sliding through the mist. Their long guns swing, searching. They're advancing blind, no reconnaissance screen, bunched too tight. Clark's plan activates. Artillery opens first. 105mm shells from M7 Priests scream overhead, air bursting above the German formation. Fragments rake open engine decks, slash through crew compartments. One Panther's commander collapses, chest torn open. Hoffman's Sherman lurches forward, angling right. The fog is friend and enemy. It hides him, but also conceals threats. His driver threads between tree lines while Hoffman directs the gunner. Traverse left, target 9 o'clock, 400 yards. A Panther's flank. 50mm of side armor versus 75mm M3 gun. The mathematics work. Wham! The round punches through. Orange flame vomits from hatches. German crewmen tumble out, uniforms burning. Hoffman's loader already rams another shell home. To his left, Lieutenant Leiper's M18 Hellcats dart between positions like angry hornets. Their 76mm guns crack repeatedly. One Hellcat takes a hit, armor-piercing round through the open top, but the other 3 keep firing, displacing, firing. Above, engines roar. P-47 Thunderbolts drop through gaps in fog, 8 50-caliber machine guns per aircraft chattering death. Rockets streak down. One Panther's turret lifts 6 feet from impact force, flips, crashes inverted. The German formation disintegrates. Some Panthers reverse blindly, exposing rear armor. Others spin tracks trying to orient on threats from multiple directions. Coordination vanishes. Radio discipline collapses. Individual crews fight isolated battles. 11 Panthers burning. 23 minutes elapsed. Hoffman's loader vomits over spent casings. The smell, cordite, diesel, cooked flesh, makes breathing torture. But they're alive. The system worked. For the Germans trapped in dying steel, hell arrived synchronized and merciless.
The Panther Ostf G represents the apex of German medium tank design in 1944. Sloped frontal armor, 85mm at 55 degrees. Effective thickness against projectiles, approximately 140mm. The 75mm KWK-42L70 cannon fires tungsten core Panzergranate 40 rounds at 930 meters per second, capable of penetrating 120mm of armor at 500 meters. Against a Sherman's frontal armor, maximum 51mm at 47 degrees, the Panther's gun is catastrophically superior. Yet at Aracourt, Panthers burn in disproportionate numbers. The vulnerability lies in geometry and doctrine. Side armor, 50mm vertical. Rear armor, 40mm. Engine deck, 16mm. A Sherman's M61 armor-piercing round, velocity 619 meters per second, projectile weight 6.8 kilograms, can penetrate 50mm at 300 meters when striking perpendicular. The M18 Hellcat's M62 APC-BC round, fired from its 76mm M1A1 gun, penetrates 93mm at 500 meters. Against Panther side armor, overmatch at practical ranges. German doctrine assumes frontal engagements where armor advantage dominates. Training emphasizes long-range gunnery, hold-down positions, coordinated platoon fire. Allied doctrine inverts this. Artillery creates chaos, aircraft force dispersal. Infantry with bazookas threaten from covered positions. Tank destroyers maneuver to flank. Shermans coordinate in teams. One fixes attention frontally while others exploit gaps. The Sherman's gyrostabilizer allows firing while moving. Crude accuracy, but enough to force Panthers to halt and return fire, losing mobility advantage.
Radio coordination proves decisive. Every Sherman has VHF equipment. Every platoon communicates with artillery and air support. German Panthers often lack working radios due to component shortages. Some crews navigate by following the tank ahead. Mechanical reliability compounds German failures. Panthers require 8 hours of maintenance per operational hour. Final drives fail catastrophically under combat stress. Transmission problems strand tanks short of objectives. At Aracourt, of 262 German armored vehicles deployed, 114 suffered damage or breakdown unrelated to enemy fire. The Americans lose 41 Shermans in September, mostly repairable. Superior steel loses to superior system.
Unteroffizier Hans Weber writes home 3 days before his death at Aracourt. The Americans have eyes everywhere. We move at night, freeze by day under camouflage nets. Sleep comes in 20-minute intervals. My hands shake constantly. Yesterday, Fritz collapsed. Nerves, the medic said. He's 19. Post-war interrogations reveal the psychological erosion. General Leo Gehr von Schweppenburg, interviewed May 24, 1945. The combination of air and tank was most effective versus German armor. Air attacks were most feared by tank crews. General Paul Hauser provides statistics. 20% lost through air attacks, 50% through anti-tank defense. Tanks and tank destroyers feared most by German tank crews. An 8-year veteran tanker testifies that white phosphorus shells, Willie Pete, terrorized German crews more than standard ammunition. The white smoke made crews believe their tank was burning. Many abandoned operational vehicles in panic. The sensory assault overwhelms doctrine. Inside a Panther, artillery creates unique horror. Crew compartments ring like bells. Each near miss physically batters occupants. Concussions cause hemorrhaging. Psychological breakdown manifests as paralysis, trembling, uncontrollable urination. American crews face their own terror. Sergeant Bill Hoffman, 37th Tank Battalion, describes nightmares recurring decades later. You smell them burning. German boys screaming inside locked hatches. You fire because they'll kill you if you don't, but you hear it forever. The Normandy campaign created a generation of veteran American tankers who learned to function through fear. By Aracourt, they've mastered tactical movement under fire, coordinated responses to threats, rapid target identification. Psychological resilience comes from training, unit cohesion, and, critically, confidence in the system protecting them. German replacement crews lacked a seasoning. The 113th Panzer Brigade's personnel spent 2 weeks together before combat. No shared hardship, no earned trust. When chaos erupts, individual survival instinct overrides unit cohesion. The result? Tactical paralysis. Crews fight as isolated machines rather than coordinated teams, turning technical superiority into strategic liability. Terror becomes a weapon as lethal as tungsten core ammunition.
German intelligence captures an intact M18 Hellcat near Luneville, September 20, 1944. The technical assessment reveals uncomfortable truths. Maximum armor, 25 millimeters. Any German tank gun can penetrate it at practical ranges. Yet this fragile vehicle has destroyed dozens of Panthers through speed and maneuver. Field Marshal von Rundstedt's staff issues revised tactical guidance. Avoid predictable routes, employ smoke more aggressively, maintain dispersed formations to minimize artillery impact. Panthers receive orders to advance with infantry screens protecting flanks. Implementation proves impossible. Fuel shortages prevent tactical flexibility. Infantry units lack transport to keep pace with armor. Smoke generators require resources unavailable. Radio communication gaps prevent coordinated responses. One adaptation succeeds, the Jagd Panther tank destroyer, mounting the 88mm PaK 43/3 L71 gun. It combines Panther chassis with casemate-mounted gun, offering superior frontal armor, 80mm at 55 degrees, and a weapon capable of engaging targets beyond 2,000 meters. But only 413 Jagd Panthers reach completion before war's end. At Aracourt, none are available. German crews improvise desperately. Some weld spare track sections onto Panther turrets, creating crude additional protection. Others paint camouflage schemes attempting to break vehicle silhouettes. Experienced commanders like Oberlieutenant Wilhelm Biltz develop defensive tactics, pre-position in ambush, allow Americans to advance into kill zones, execute fighting withdrawals to prepared positions. These adaptations work, sometimes. At the Battle of the Bulge, December 1944, German forces achieve initial surprise by attacking during weather grounding Allied aircraft. Tiger IIs of the 501st Heavy SS Tank Battalion temporarily restore armor dominance. Then, skies clear. Allied fighter bombers devastate German columns. By January 15, 1945, the Western Front possesses just 190 operational German tanks versus approximately 2,000 Allied vehicles. The fundamental problem remains unsolvable with available resources. German doctrine requires mobility, concentration, and air superiority, none of which exist by late 1944. Captured American training manuals confirm German fears. Allied forces have systematized combined arms coordination into doctrine, teaching it at battalion level and below. The student has surpassed the teacher.
September 29, 1944. The final German attack at Ericourt collapses in catastrophic failure. Of 262 tanks and assault guns deployed by the 5th Panzer Army during the 11-day battle, only 62 remain operational. 86 destroyed in combat, 114 damaged or broken down. German casualties, approximately 2,300 killed or wounded, 265 captured. Combat Command A losses, 41 M4 Shermans, 7 M5A1 light tanks, 7 tank destroyers. Casualties, 225 killed, 648 wounded. The kill ratio speaks volumes about doctrine versus steel. This pattern repeats across Western Europe. At the Battle of the Bulge, German forces commit over 1,400 tanks and armored fighting vehicles. By January 15, 1945, just under half the Panzer IVs are lost, along with 40% of Panthers, perhaps 320 tanks total. The Bulge effectively destroys German armored capability in the West. Why? Because the Allies created something unprecedented, a military system where artillery, air power, tank destroyers, infantry anti-tank teams, and medium tanks functioned as synchronized instruments. German armor, isolated by fuel shortages and mechanical failures, faced coordinated destruction from multiple threat vectors simultaneously. The modern military term is combined arms integration at the tactical level. The legacy persists. Today's American brigade combat teams train on principles refined at Ericourt: intelligence preparation of the battlefield, coordinated fires, rapid maneuver to enemy weak points, flexibility and execution. German tank crews weren't defeated by inferior courage or training. They were defeated by a system that rendered individual tank superiority irrelevant. 80 millimeters of armor couldn't stop artillery shells arriving coordinates by radio, or aircraft summoned by forward observers, or flanking tank destroyers coordinating through VHF networks. Steel alone never wins wars. Systems do. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical or documented sources.
The tungsten core exits the muzzle at 1,200 meters per second. 3 aluminum petals spin away into the French hedgerow. What remains is impossibly small, a 7-pound dart flying at velocities that make steel shatter. Inside the Panther tank, 300 meters away, the driver doesn't hear it coming. The sub-caliber projectile strikes the glacis plate at 55 degrees. At this angle, conventional rounds ricochet. The laws of deflection should save the crew. Sloped armor, Germany's geometric masterpiece, the principle that won them France, that made their tanks nearly invulnerable from the front. Should. The tungsten doesn't care about angles. At impact velocity, metal stops behaving like metal. It flows. The Panther's 80mm plate, angled to present 140mm effective thickness, might as well be butter. The penetrator cores through, fragmenting only after entry. Inside, the crew has 0.3 seconds to understand what's happening. They never do. July 1944, Normandy. The Sherman Firefly crew reloads, sliding another APDS round into the breach. Their 17-pounder gun cost Britain 2 years of desperate engineering, countless failed prototypes, and the realization that traditional ballistics had reached their limit. The Germans had changed warfare with slope, Britain changed it back with speed. This is the story of the round that made geometry irrelevant, how 2 designers at Armaments Research Department turned physics into a weapon, how a tiny tungsten dart traveling faster than a rifle bullet rewrote the rules of armored warfare. The Panther's turret doesn't traverse, its crew doesn't bail out. Because they're already dead, killed by math moving at 3,900 feet per second. Stay with this story, it's about to get technical, and that's where it gets beautiful.
January 1943, North Africa. British gunners aim their 6-pounder anti-tank guns at the new German Tiger I. They fire. The 57mm rounds bounce off at 800 meters like stones skipping water. 2 crews die before they understand the problem. The Germans had cracked a fundamental equation. Thickness plus angle equals survival. The Panther tank's glacis, 80mm of face-hardened steel set at 55 degrees, presented 140mm effective thickness. The Tiger's frontal armor laughed at anything Britain could field. Every engagement became a flanking exercise, a desperate hunt for side shots. Churchill tanks burned, Cromwells brewed up. British tank crews developed a morbid nickname for their Shermans, Ronsons. They light first time. At Armaments Research Department in Woolwich, the numbers told a brutal story. Steel armor-piercing rounds shattered above 850 meters per second. Make them heavier, they travel slower. Make them faster, they disintegrate on impact. The energy equation appeared insoluble. German engineers had weaponized geometry itself. Two men inherited this nightmare: Perlmutter, a Belgian who'd fled the Brandt Company ahead of the Wehrmacht, and Kapok, a British metallurgist. Between them, they knew three things. First, tungsten carbide could withstand velocities that destroyed steel. Second, a lighter projectile accelerated faster in the bore. Third, the French had experimented with sabots, wooden shoes that fell away after firing centuries ago with cannonballs. What if you combined all three? The concept seemed simple. Wrap a small tungsten core in a lightweight aluminum shell. Fire it at impossible velocity. Let the shell fall away. What remains is a hyper-dense penetrator moving faster than any full-caliber round could dream of. Simple, except nothing about it worked. Not at first. Not for 18 months of failures. By mid-1943, every British tank commander knew the score. Face a Panther frontally, you die. The question wasn't if but when Germany's armored advantage would decide the war.
The workshop at Woolwich smelled of scorched aluminum and failure. Test firing number 47. The aluminum saber, French for clog, was supposed to separate cleanly after exit. Instead, it tumbled, taking the tungsten core with it. The round struck the test plate sideways. Useless. Perlmutter adjusted the tolerance, 0.005 inches tighter fit between core and carrier. Metal screamed against metal in the proof range. The air tasted of cordite in desperation. Each test consumed tungsten they didn't have, time they couldn't afford. Germany was fielding Panthers at a rate of 300 per month. Britain was fielding excuses. The core problem was spin. Rifling imparts rotation for stability. Full-caliber rounds gripped the barrel's grooves, but their subcaliber core sat inside the saber, separated by a critical gap. Too loose, the rifling spin never transferred. The core wobbled in flight, accuracy suffered. Too tight, and the saber wouldn't discard. Test 61, Kapok proposed a Sweet pedal design. Aluminum pedals would grip the rifling, transfer spin, then shear away on exit. Simple mechanical principle. Except the shearing forces had to be precisely calibrated. Too much tension, the pedals wouldn't release. Too little, they'd release in bore, potentially destroying the gun. The solution came at 0300 on a Tuesday. Serrated grooves at the pedal-to-base junction. The setback forces during firing would pre-fracture them. Outside the barrel, spin and air resistance would complete the separation. They fired at dawn. The saber discarded perfectly. The tungsten core, just 3.5 kilograms of machine precision, struck the test plate at 1,200 meters per second, through 100 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. Clean entry hole, catastrophic spalling on the far side. Perlmutter lit a cigarette with shaking hands. They'd just doubled the effective range of every British anti-tank gun. Maybe. If they could manufacture it. If crews could be trained. If the tungsten supply held.
June 1944. The first APDS rounds arrive in Normandy not as a flood, but as a trickle. 6 rounds per Firefly. Crews are told to save them for hardened targets only. Trooper David Wilson, 4th County of London Yeomanry, loads his first discarding sabot round and thinks it looks wrong. Too light. The shell is mostly air and aluminum. This is supposed to kill a tiger? The answer comes 3 days later. A Panther appears through the hedgerow at 400 meters, hull down, glacis angled. Standard doctrine: don't engage frontally, flank it, call for infantry support, pray. Wilson's gunner doesn't flank, he fires APDS. The round exits at 3,900 feet per second. The sabot petals spin away in a distinctive spiral, 3 aluminum flowers blooming in milliseconds. The tungsten penetrator impacts before the sound of the shot reaches the Panther crew. It goes through the glacis that was supposed to be invulnerable, through the driver's compartment, through the rear plate. The Panther's engine catches fire from the inside. Wilson's immediate thought: Jesus Christ, what did we just fire? But the weapon reveals its flaws immediately. Second shot, 600 meters, APDS again. The round misses completely. Dirt erupts 40 feet left of target. No visible impact to spot the fall of shot. The subcaliber core kicks up such a tiny dust cloud that fire correction becomes guesswork. Third shot, APCBC, standard ammunition, miss. Fourth shot, hit, Panther burns. The after-action report notes, APDS effective at penetration. Accuracy questionable beyond 500 yards. Crews report difficulty observing strike. What nobody writes down, we just changed tank warfare, and nobody's noticed yet. The round that makes angles irrelevant exists. It just needs refinement. And combat data, which means more dead Panthers. More dead Germans who thought sloped armor was their salvation.
By August 1944, intelligence officers are seeing patterns. German tank tactics shift. Panthers no longer advance hull down with impunity. Tiger commanders hang back, choosing longer engagement ranges. Somebody's learning. The learning comes from autopsies. Wehrmacht recovery teams examining knocked-out Panthers find impossible holes, entry wounds through glacis plates that should deflect anything. The penetration mechanics don't match any known Allied round. They're pulling tungsten fragments from interior spalling. At Falaise, the equation changes permanently. British anti-tank regiments now deploy 17-pounders in overwatching positions, specifically hunting heavies. The APDS allocation increases to 12 rounds per gun. Not abundance, but enough. Firefly Shermans become priority targets for German gunners who've learned the hard way that specific Sherman variant can kill you from the front. Production capacity becomes the bottleneck. Tungsten supply, never generous, determines how many rounds Britain can field. Each APDS projectile requires 3.5 kilograms of centered tungsten carbide, material better suited for machine tools and armor-piercing bombs. The Ministry of Supply makes calculations. How many dead Panthers equals how many delayed bomber operations? The answer reshapes doctrine. Infantry anti-tank platoons receive priority. One 17-pounder with APDS can hold a crossroads against a Panzer battalion. That's not hyperbole. That's verified at Arnhem, where single guns knock out multiple Tigers before being overrun. German procurement officers note a problem. Their advantage in armored warfare, built on superior metallurgy and slope design, is evaporating, not through superior Allied tanks, through superior Allied ammunition. At Krupp, engineers are tasked with creating effective APDS. They fail. Germany lacks tungsten. Without tungsten, you can't create the dense penetrator. Without the penetrator, you can't match British penetration. By October, the strategic balance is inverted. German tanks survive through evasion, not protection. Sloped armor, the principle that saved them at Kursk, now barely matters. Physics doesn't care about angles when velocity reaches hydrodynamic thresholds.
December 1944, Ardennes. The Firefly's engine idles at 70 meters from the crossroads. Inside, the crew waits. Cold so bitter their breath freezes on the gun sight. Movement. Track noise. The distinctive diesel growl of a Panther. Contact front, the commander whispers into the intercom. Panther, 200 meters. The gunner's hands are numb. He can barely feel the traverse. The Panther emerges through snow, glacis angled perfectly, presenting maximum effective thickness. Textbook positioning. 2 years ago, this would be suicide to engage frontally. APDS loaded. The round weighs almost nothing compared to standard ammunition. In the breech, it looks like a toy. The tungsten core is invisible inside its aluminum carrier. Trust the engineers. Trust the math. The Panther's turret begins to traverse. They've been spotted. Fire. The world becomes noise and recoil. The gun slams backward against its mounting. Through the viewport, 3 aluminum petals spiral away like dying birds. The sabot separation creates a distinctive visual, something crews learn to recognize, to trust. Impact. The tungsten core strikes the Panther's glacis at the weld line. At 1200 meters per second, material science becomes fluid dynamics. The penetrator doesn't care about slope angle, doesn't care about face hardening, doesn't care that the plate is rated for 140 millimeters effective thickness. It punches through like the armor isn't there. Inside the Panther, the driver's last thought is confused. They weren't even hit frontally in a vulnerable spot. This shouldn't be possible. The tungsten core fragments after penetration. Secondary fragmentation tears through the fighting compartment. The Panther coasts to a stop, turret frozen mid-traverse. The Firefly's loader is already loading APCBC. APDS are too precious to waste on a confirmed kill. Target destroyed. Scanning for... Second contact. Tiger. 400 meters. The loader's hands shake. APDS or standard. How many rounds do they have left? The math becomes survival. And the Tiger is already firing.
The physics behind APDS defeating sloped armor requires understanding material behavior at extreme velocities. Traditional armor piercing relies on a projectile maintaining structural integrity while transferring kinetic energy. APDS operates in a different regime entirely. At 1200 meters per second impact velocity, metals transition to hydrodynamic behavior. The tungsten carbide penetrator density 15.6 grams per cubic centimeter, encounters armor steel at 7.85 grams per centimeter cubed. The density ratio becomes critical. The penetrator essentially flows through the target, like high-velocity fluid through lesser-density fluid. Slope angle, which normally forces deflection, becomes nearly irrelevant above threshold velocities. Here's why. The penetrator's kinetic energy per unit area, sectional density times velocity squared, exceeds the target material's yield strength by orders of magnitude. The armor doesn't deflect the round. It fails locally, exactly at impact point. The tungsten core measures approximately 40 millimeters diameter, 200 millimeters length to diameter ratio of 5:1. This geometry concentrates pressure over minimal area while maintaining sufficient mass for deep penetration. The full 17-pounder round weighs 17 pounds. The APDS subprojectile, just 7.7 pounds, but it carries 60% more kinetic energy on target due to velocity advantage. Muzzle velocity, 3,950 feet per second versus 2,900 feet per second for conventional APCBC rounds. Energy equation, 1/2 mass times velocity squared. Despite lower mass, the velocity advantage delivers 20% more kinetic energy concentrated into half the impact area. The aluminum sabot, 3 or 4 kettles depending on variant, weighs mere ounces. Its purpose, provide full bore diameter for efficient propellant gas expansion while adding negligible mass. The pedals must transfer rifling spin to the core despite a small clearance gap. Too tight, they won't discard. Too loose, accuracy suffers. Some sources report penetration of 256 millimeters at 500 meters against vertical armor. Others cite 187 millimeters at 30-degree obliquity. The discrepancy reflects testing criteria differences. British versus German standards, different brittle hardness ratings, different success definitions. What's undisputed, the round could defeat any German tank's frontal armor at combat ranges, sloped or not.
Sergeant James Crawford, 2nd Northamptonshire Yeomanry, writes home in September 1944. The new ammunition makes the gun sound different, sharper, like the air itself is tearing. The Jerry tanks burn the same, but our lads are less afraid now. That's the difference. We're not terrified of Panthers anymore. The psychological shift cuts both directions. British crews develop confidence bordering on overconfidence. APDS creates a dangerous assumption. Frontal engagement is survivable. It isn't. The round penetrates armor, but German guns still penetrate Sherman armor just as easily. The Firefly's advantage is offensive, not defensive. Crews learned brutal lessons. Trooper Michael Holmes describes his first APDS miss. You can't see where it lands. The dirt puff is tiny. We fired 3 rounds at a Tiger before we realized we were missing left. By then, he'd seen our muzzle flashes. We lost the driver and bow gunner before we could reverse out. The cognitive burden is real. APDS for harded targets, APCBCC for reliable hits, HE for soft targets. Split-second decisions while being shot at. Load the wrong round, you die. Load APDS, miss due to accuracy issues, you die. Second guess yourself, you die. German tank crews develop their own terror. Letters recovered from knocked-out Panthers reveal obsessive focus on the Shermans with the long gun. One tanker writes, "They can kill us from the front now. Nowhere is safe. The angled armor that saved us at Kursk means nothing against the tungsten rounds." The material cost extends beyond tungsten. APDS rounds foul barrels faster. The subcaliber design creates uneven pressure distribution. Barrel life decreases. Crews notice the gun's accuracy degrading after 100 APDS firings. In combat, this means uncertainty compounding uncertainty. And there's the weight of selection. Each Firefly carries limited APDS. Every shot fired is a choice to deplete a finite resource. The loader's hands shake not from fear but from decision fatigue. Fire now and maybe miss, or wait for perfect shot geometry and maybe get killed first. The tungsten doesn't judge, but the war does.
German intelligence designates APDS as Hartkernmunition mit Treibspiegel, hardcore ammunition with sabot. Wehrmacht technical teams disassemble captured British ammunition. They understand the principle immediately. Implementing it proves impossible. Germany's tungsten supply, never abundant, was exhausted by competing priorities: machine tools, U-boat armor penetrators, aircraft parts. Creating APDS required sintered tungsten carbide at 3.5 kilograms per round. The numbers didn't work. Panthers continued production at 300 per month. Creating sufficient tungsten stocks for defensive ammunition would require shutting down other programs. Instead, German engineers pursued alternative solutions. Some advocated increasing armor thickness, the Königstiger's 150mm frontal plate. Others pushed reactive concepts, spaced armor, Scherzen side plates, anything to disrupt the penetrator's physics. None fully negated APDS, but they increased survival chances. Tactical adaptations proved more effective. Panther commanders learned to avoid frontal engagements with Fireflies specifically. Recognition training emphasized the Firefly's distinct profile, longer barrel, different muzzle brake, often positioned at the rear of Sherman platoons. Soviet intelligence officers examined APDS captured at Partzen. They recognized its potential but faced identical tungsten constraints. Russian APDS development lagged until post-war, when captured German and British technical documents accelerated their programs. The BR-412D round for the 122mm gun represented their first successful implementation, 1950. American ordnance officers tested British APDS extensively. The US Army declined adoption for complex reasons: not invented here syndrome, existing 76mm and 90mm programs, confidence in their own HVAP, high-velocity armor-piercing composite rigid rounds. This decision proved costly during the Battle of the Bulge, where American tankers faced Panthers and Tigers with inferior ammunition. Some British units reported German tanks deploying smoke more aggressively, obscuring firing lanes before exposure. Others noted Panthers reversing immediately after firing, denying British gunners time for follow-up APDS shots. Adaptation versus counter-adaptation, the eternal arms race compressed into months. What couldn't be counted? Pure kinetic energy. No amount of tactical adaptation defeats physics traveling at 1,200 meters per second.
May 1945. A Tiger II sits abandoned near Bremen, its turret traversed to face an empty street. British investigators examine McLeish's plate. 2 perfectly circular holes, 40mm diameter. Entry wounds. The 180mm frontal armor, sloped at 50 degrees, presenting 235mm effective thickness, was supposed to be impervious to any Allied gun. Supposed to be. The APDS rounds created wounds traditional ballistics couldn't explain. This wasn't deflection failure or weld weakness. This was complete negation of the geometric advantage Germany had built their armored doctrine around. The legacy extends far beyond 1945. Modern armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot, APFSDS, the primary anti-tank round of every main battle tank today, descends directly from Perlmutter and Koppach's work. The principle remains identical: small, dense penetrator wrapped in discarding carrier, fired at extreme velocity. Modern penetrators use depleted uranium or advanced tungsten alloys, achieve 1,700 meters per second, penetrate 700 millimeters of armor equivalent. But the physics? Unchanged since 1944. The M1 Abrams, Leopard 2, Challenger 2, every modern tank fires APDS's evolutionary descendant. The sabot concept that seemed radical in wartime Britain became fundamental to armored warfare. Sloped armor didn't disappear. Modern tanks still employ angular design, but it's now just one variable in a complex equation that includes composite materials, reactive armor, and active protection systems. The human cost gets lost in technical specifications. Each APDS round fired represented a crew member loading under fire, a gunner compensating for accuracy quirks, a commander deciding between scarce tungsten and more reliable conventional rounds. The statistics, thousands of German tanks destroyed, obscure the individual terror of facing Panther armor with experimental ammunition. But the strategic impact is undeniable. Britain entered the war unable to defeat German heavy armor frontally. By 1945, their worst tanks could kill Germany's best, not through superior design, through superior physics. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historical or documented sources.